Here's something that might surprise you. The most dangerous foods for your brain and body aren't poisons. They're legal, they're normalized, and in many cases, they're sitting in your fridge right now. What's even more interesting is this: when you eat them regularly, you don't feel a sudden drop in energy or sharp chest pain. The damage is subtle, it builds slowly, it accumulates like compound interest, but in reverse. That's because your nervous system, your cardiovascular health, your gut-brain axis, even your mood and sleep are shaped by molecular signals your body receives from what you eat. And when the inputs are wrong, when your brain is getting low-grade inflammatory signals every day from your diet, what you start to experience is a slow erosion of resilience, of vitality, of clarity. Research from institutions like Harvard, Stanford, and the Cleveland Clinic has consistently shown that certain everyday foods drive up systemic inflammation, disrupt insulin signaling, weaken the integrity of your gut lining, and even impair neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and rewire itself. In short, they age you faster inside and out. And the worst part, most of them are marketed as normal, convenient, or even healthy. So today we're going to cut through the noise. No fads, no fear-mongering, just real science, and simple tools to help you make better choices without overhauling your entire life. We'll break down 7 foods or food categories that consistently show up in the research as harmful to long-term health, especially brain health, cardiovascular function, metabolic resilience, and mood regulation. But this isn't about guilt or restriction. It's about knowledge and leverage. You'll learn what's actually happening in your body when you eat these foods, why they cause harm even in small daily doses, and most importantly, what you can do instead. You'll leave with specific science-backed actions you can start applying today. Small shifts, big returns. Because the truth is, food isn't just fuel, it's information. And the right information can help you stay sharp, strong, and energized well into your 60s, 70s, and beyond. Let's get into it. Let's start with one of the most deceptive ingredients in the modern diet, industrial seed oils. You'll find them in salad dressings, chips, frozen meals, protein bars, even so-called health foods. Common names include soybean oil, corn oil, sunflower oil, safflower oil, cottonseed oil, and canola oil. What most people don't realize is these oils are extremely high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fats, specifically linoleic acid. And here's the problem. Omega-6s aren't bad in and of themselves. In fact, your body needs them. But when your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio gets skewed, as it does in most modern diets, you're setting up the perfect storm for chronic inflammation. What's happening in your body when this imbalance occurs is subtle but powerful. Cell membranes, especially in your brain, are made of fatty acids. The more omega-6 you consume, the more they displace anti-inflammatory omega-3s in your cellular structure. This shifts your entire inflammatory baseline upward. It's like turning up the volume on your body's stress response, even if nothing seems wrong on the surface. Here's what the research shows. A 2021 study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that higher levels of linoleic acid in red blood cells were correlated with increased markers of systemic inflammation and higher all-cause mortality. Another study in Nature demonstrated that oxidized linoleic acid metabolites directly impair mitochondrial function, the energy engines of your cells. That includes your neurons. And when mitochondria in the brain get sluggish, so does everything else: focus, memory, emotional regulation, even sleep quality. You may not feel this immediately, but over time it looks like brain fog, mood instability, fatigue after meals, and a slow erosion of cardiovascular resilience. So how did these oils become so dominant in our diets? It's largely industrial, they're cheap, they're shelf-stable, and they emulsify well, meaning food manufacturers love them. But your brain, your arteries, not so much. Here's a simple tool to apply. Start reading the ingredients label, not just the nutrition facts. If you see soybean, corn, canola, or any of the other industrial seed oils, treat it like a yellow flag. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to reduce your baseline exposure. Better options. Look for extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, or even small amounts of grass-fed butter or ghee. These fats have more stable structures and come with anti-inflammatory neuroprotective benefits. One randomized controlled trial published in JAMA Internal Medicine found that people who followed a Mediterranean-style diet high in olive oil had significantly lower risk of stroke and cognitive decline over time. Here's tips: another behavioral shift. Try cooking at home with stable fats. Olive oil is fine for most medium heat cooking. Avocado oil holds up better for higher temperatures. And if you eat out, assume most restaurants use industrial oils. So just balance it out the rest of the week by sticking with clean, whole food fats. This isn't about panic or perfection. It's about reclaiming control over the invisible inputs that shape your brain and body over time. Because every cell in your nervous system is built from what you eat. And the more you shift toward anti-inflammatory, neurologically supportive fats, the better you'll feel mentally, emotionally, and physically. Have you ever noticed how your focus crashes after a sugary breakfast, or how you feel tired but wired after a carb-heavy snack? That's not just in your head. It's a direct result of how ultra-processed carbohydrates interact with your metabolism and your brain's dopamine system. Let Zeps break it down. Refined carbs, like white bread, pastries, sugary cereals, granola bars, and even most energy snacks are stripped of fiber and nutrients. What's left is starch and sugar. That means they digest fast, spike your blood glucose quickly, and trigger a rapid insulin response. What happens in your brain is even more interesting. These foods light up your dopamine pathways, the same reward circuits activated by addictive drugs. The more you eat, the more your brain learns to crave that rapid hit. Over time, you develop what researchers call hedonic eating, where your hunger isn't physiological, it's emotional and neurological. A study published in Cell Metabolism in 2023 found that high glycemic load foods can rewire the striatum, the part of the brain that regulates habit and motivation, leading to increased cravings and decreased sensitivity to natural rewards like movement, connection, or achievement. You're not just hungrier, you're less satisfied with everything else. That's one reason people often report brain fog, mood dips, and even anxiety after consuming refined carbs. You're getting wild glucose fluctuations, unstable energy, and erratic neurotransmitter signaling. And if this pattern becomes your default diet, the risk of insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and even cognitive decline goes way up. Here's what the research shows. Data from the Nurses' Health Study, a long-term cohort involving over 70,000 participants, revealed that women who consumed the highest levels of refined carbohydrates had a significantly increased risk of depression. And a 2019 study published in The Lancet Public Health linked high sugar intake to smaller hippocampal volume, essentially a shrunken memory center. Here sits a tool you can use immediately. Prioritize carbs that digest slowly and come with fiber. Think sweet potatoes, steel-cut oats, lentils, berries, and whole fruits. When you eat these, glucose enters your bloodstream at a steady pace, keeping insulin and energy more stable. That means fewer crashes, more focus, and better emotional regulation. Another tool is meal sequencing. Start your meal with fiber and protein, vegetables or a salad, followed by fish, eggs, or beans. Then eat carbs last. A 2015 study in diabetes care showed that eating this way can reduce post-meal glucose spikes by over 40%. Also, if you're someone who gets cravings in the late afternoon or evening, ask yourself, what did your first meal look like? High-carb breakfasts, even if they're labeled healthy, often lead to rebound hunger later. Try swapping your first meal to include more protein and fat, like eggs with avocado or a Greek yogurt bowl with nuts and berries. You'll likely notice your cravings fade without trying. And if this kind of science-backed guidance is helping you connect the dots, consider subscribing. This channel is here to give you real tools, not trends, to upgrade how you feel, focus, and function every single day. Because here's the thing, refined carbs don't just affect your waistline. They reshape how your brain responds to reward. They create a loop that's hard to break unless you understand what's happening. But once you do, you're no longer reacting, you're in charge. Here's the thing. When you eat processed meat, you're not just eating protein and fat. You're ingesting a cocktail of molecular insults that over time chip away at your vascular resilience, your gut integrity, and even your cognitive edge. This isn't fear-based messaging, it's pattern recognition from decades of epidemiology and mechanistic biology. Let's unpack what's actually happening. First, the preservatives. Sodium nitrite and nitrate are used to preserve color and prevent bacterial growth, but in your gut they can convert into N-nitrosamines, potent carcinogens. Those compounds damage DNA, promote chronic intestinal inflammation, and set the stage for early changes that down the line become colorectal cancer. Large meta-analyses have flagged processed meat as a consistent cause of colorectal cancer, with regular intake increasing risk in a dose-dependent way. That's not speculative. It's why major cancer prevention panels classify processed meat as a cause, not just a correlation. Second, there's the vascular and metabolic hit. Processed meats don't just have salt and fat. They contain compounds that elevate blood pressure and promote endothelial dysfunction. Nitrite intake from these sources has been linked to higher diastolic and systolic blood pressure, a foundational driver of cardiovascular disease. That raises your baseline stress on the arteries, making the heart work harder, impairing oxygen delivery, and subtly degrading brain perfusion over years. Third, the gut-brain axis plays a role. The processing and preservatives shift microbial composition, promoting dysbiosis. That creates a low-level inflammatory signature, cytokines, immune activation, leaky gut that communicates directly with the brain. Chronic exposure nudges neuroinflammation, which over time degrades cognitive clarity and resilience. Long-term data has started to link higher intake of processed red meat with increased risk of dementia and worse cognition. While causality isn't fully settled, the associations are consistent enough that substituting even small amounts appears protective. There's also the heme iron and compounds formed during curing and heating. These interact in the gut to create reactive species and pro-inflammatory signaling. Think of your colon like a garden. Certain compounds from processed meat are like invasive weeds that change soil pH, disrupt the microbiome, and release metabolites that encourage unhealthy cell growth. Over time, that shift in the internal ecosystem increases risk for tumors and metabolic dysfunction. What this really means is your occasional indulgence likely isn't catastrophic, but habitual baseline consumption is a slow burn. The body doesn't always shout, it whispers with rising biomarkers, subtle mood drift, memory lapses, elevated blood pressure, and systemic inflammation. Left unaddressed, those whispers compound into disease decades later. Here sits a practical framework. Audit your baseline. Track how often you're eating processed meat, bacon with breakfast, deli slices and lunches, sausage snacks. If it's multiple times per week, that's your leverage point. Swap strategically. Replace one processed meat serving per day or per several days with a non-processed protein, beans, lentils, wild-caught fish, pasture-raised eggs, or even minimally processed lean cuts. Studies suggest that replacing processed red meat with plant proteins or nuts can reduce dementia risk substantially and lower overall inflammatory load. Limit co-risk multipliers. Smoking, low fiber intake, and high glycemic diets amplify the harm of processed meat. If you're not ready to eliminate it entirely, first shut down those multipliers, add fiber, for example, vegetables, resistant starch, quit smoking, and stabilize blood sugar. Moderate frequency consciously. If you want a ritual, say weekend bacon, make it that. Don't let it bleed into daily habit. Pair it with anti-inflammatory buffers, a large vegetable side, fermented foods to support microbiota, and plenty of hydration to aid clearance. Here's what the research shows in aggregate. Consistent consumption of processed meat increases colorectal cancer risk, raises cardiovascular mortality, elevates blood pressure, and correlates with higher incidence of cognitive decline and dementia. The empowering part is this: small shifts compound. Swap one processed meat meal per week for a cleaner protein. Add fiber to your plate. Reduce the background noise of inflammation. You don't need to be perfect, just incrementally better. Over months, your blood pressure stabilizes, your gut environment improves, your brain gets fewer inflammatory signals, and your risk trajectory bends downward. Ask yourself, which processed meat habit is easiest to blunt this week? Pick one, execute it, and observe how your energy, clarity, or even digestion responds. That's how momentum builds. Let's be honest, the appeal of artificial sweeteners is pretty clear. You get the sweetness without the calories, the taste of soda without the sugar crash. It feels like a win-win until you look a little deeper into what's happening below the surface. Aspartame, sucralose, saccharin. These are some of the most common non-nutritive sweeteners used in everything from diet sodas to protein powders to sugar-free gum. And while they do have fewer calories than sugar, recent research has revealed they may not be the metabolic free pass they were once thought to be. Let's start with what happens in the gut. Your microbiome, the trillions of bacteria lining your digestive tract, plays a massive role in regulating immune function, inflammation, mood, and even glucose metabolism. When you consume artificial sweeteners, especially on a daily basis, they alter the composition and behavior of that ecosystem. A landmark 2014 study in Nature found that mice fed saccharin developed glucose intolerance, essentially prediabetes, because of changes in their gut bacteria. When the altered microbiome was transferred to healthy mice, those mice also developed glucose intolerance, even without consuming the sweetener. That's a strong causal link. More recent human studies have shown similar disruptions. A 2022 clinical trial published in Cell found that consuming sucralose and saccharin for just 2 weeks significantly impaired blood glucose control in some individuals. The effect wasn't universal, but that's the point. Some people are more sensitive than others, and you won't know if you're one of them until problems start to show up. And that SIP's not the only mechanism. What's happening in your brain is also worth paying attention to. Artificial sweeteners light up the brain's sweet taste receptors, but they don't deliver calories or energy. That mismatch can confuse your hypothalamus, which regulates hunger and satiety. You might feel hungrier after drinking a diet soda than if you just had a small snack. It's like sending your brain a promise you never fulfill. Over time, this can lead to increased cravings, disrupted appetite control, and poor decision-making around food. Now, that doesn't mean you need to fear every packet of stevia or every sugar-free protein shake, but it does mean you should treat artificial sweeteners as tools, not daily background noise. The dose makes the poison. Here's a behavioral protocol you can use. Identify your baseline exposure. Are you having 2 to 3 diet sodas a day? Chewing sugar-free gum all day long? Using sweetened protein or fiber bars regularly? Just track it for 48 hours. Awareness is the first step. If cravings or bloating are frequent, run a 7-day experiment. Cut all artificial sweeteners and track changes in energy, digestion, hunger cues, and mood. That 1-week window can give you powerful insight into how your body responds. When you need a sweetener, opt for those with better research support, like monk fruit extract or small amounts of stevia. These tend to have fewer effects on gut microbiota and glucose regulation, but even these should be used with intent, not automatically. You don't need to remove sweetness from your life, but the brain does better when signals match reality. Real food, real calories, real satiety. And if you're finding value in this level of clarity, the blend of neuroscience, biology, and practical tools, hit that like button and consider subscribing. It tells me this content matters to you, and it helps this community grow around smarter, simpler health upgrades. Because artificial sweeteners aren't just about cutting calories, they're about signal fidelity. And when the brain gets mixed messages, sweetness with no energy, it adapts in ways that can backfire. The good news: you can realign those signals with just a few conscious choices. Start by replacing one artificially sweetened product with something real, like berries, cinnamon, or mint tea, and notice how your body responds. Small changes, big signal clarity. There's a reason trans fats have been banned or heavily restricted in many countries. They're one of the few substances that harm the body at any dose. That's not an exaggeration. While most nutrients have a threshold or a safe range, trans fats, specifically artificial trans fats like partially hydrogenated oils, don't. They interfere with the basic architecture of your cells and silently increase your risk of heart disease, stroke, and cognitive decline. Let steps break down why. Trans fats are created through industrial hydrogenation, essentially forcing hydrogen into vegetable oils to make them more solid and shelf-stable. That process alters the chemical structure of the fat in a way that your body can't recognize properly. These unnatural molecules then get incorporated into your cell membranes, where they reduce flexibility, impair signaling, and make the cell more prone to inflammation. One of the key places this damage shows up is in your endothelium, the thin lining of your blood vessels. Trans fats impair endothelial function, which is a fancy way of saying they make it harder for your arteries to expand, contract, and deliver oxygen to your brain and muscles. Over time, this raises your risk of high blood pressure, poor circulation, and cardiovascular events. A meta-analysis published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that for every 2% increase in daily calories from trans fat, the risk of coronary heart disease jumped by over 20%. That's a massive shift from a tiny amount of intake, and what's happening in the brain is just as concerning. Your brain relies on high-quality fats to build myelin sheaths, which insulate neurons, construct cell membranes, and manage inflammatory responses. Trans fats compromise all of that. They trigger low-grade neuroinflammation and reduce the brain's ability to respond to stress, learn, or adapt, especially over the long term. In fact, a 2015 study published in PLOS One linked higher consumption of trans fats with increased aggression and irritability. Other research has correlated high trans fat intake with smaller brain volume, especially in areas tied to memory and emotional regulation. The problem? Even though trans fats are technically banned in many places, they still show up just in lower doses or under different names. Here's tips what to look for on labels. Partially hydrogenated oil is a red flag. Foods labeled as 0 grams trans fat can still contain up to 0.5 grams per serving, which adds up fast if you're eating multiple processed items a day. Here sits a practical tool you can use. Audit your pantry, especially shelf-stable snack foods, non-dairy creamers, microwave popcorn, frozen pizzas, margarine, and baked goods. If any item contains partially hydrogenated oil, pitch it. If you eat out often, especially at fast food places, limit fried items unless you know they're cooked in trans fat-free oils. Many chains still use blends that include small amounts of trans fat. Upgrade your go-to treats. Swap packaged pastries for dark chocolate, frozen berries, or home-baked goods made with real butter or coconut oil. Not only do you avoid trans fats, you also avoid a ton of extra sodium, sugar, and additives. This isn't about being obsessive. It's about being aware. Because unlike other dietary mistakes, trans fats leave a mark that accumulates quietly and the damage is systemic. One more tip if you're looking to reduce systemic inflammation overall. Focus on increasing your intake of omega-3 fats from flaxseed, chia, walnuts, or fatty fish like salmon. These fats help counterbalance the pro-inflammatory effects of previous trans fat exposure. The real win isn't just cutting out a harmful input, it's replacing it with something that actively supports your brain and body. There's a belief that a little alcohol, say a glass of wine with dinner, is not just harmless, but even beneficial. For years, the narrative was that moderate drinking supports heart health. But when researchers started digging into the data more rigorously, the picture changed. The truth is, even low-dose, regular alcohol use carries hidden physiological costs, especially to your brain, sleep quality, and long-term risk of cognitive decline. Let's start with your brain. Alcohol is a neurotoxin. That doesn't mean one drink will cause brain damage, but it does mean that alcohol, even in moderate amounts, impairs neuroplasticity. This is your brain's ability to rewire, adapt, and grow. Regular alcohol use, even at 1 drink per day, has been linked to reduced gray matter volume, especially in areas tied to memory, emotional regulation, and executive function. A large-scale 2022 study from the University of Oxford, which analyzed brain scans from over 25,000 adults, found that alcohol consumption, even just 1 to 2 drinks per day, was associated with shrinkage in multiple brain regions. The effects were dose-dependent and cumulative. There was no safe baseline where the risk stopped. Now let's look at what alcohol does to your sleep. One of the most damaging but overlooked effects of alcohol is its disruption of REM sleep. You might fall asleep faster with a drink in your system, but your sleep architecture suffers. Alcohol suppresses rapid eye movement sleep, which is critical for memory consolidation, emotional processing, and neural repair. If you've ever woken up feeling groggy after drinking, even if you slept 8 hours, this is likely why. Your brain didn't get the restorative phases it needed. Over time, poor REM sleep contributes to increased cortisol levels, poor mood regulation, and impaired decision-making. It's not just about sleep quality, it's about brain recovery. Here steps what the research shows. A 2018 study in The Lancet analyzed over 600,000 participants and found that alcohol consumption, even at moderate levels, was associated with higher risk of stroke, heart failure, and early death. The protective effects once attributed to moderate drinking were largely due to flawed methodology, like comparing drinkers to people who had already quit alcohol due to illness. So what sips the practical takeaway? This isn't a call to eliminate alcohol completely unless you want to. It's about examining the frequency, the reasoning, and the cost-to-benefit ratio for your life and your brain. Here's SEP's a behavioral framework that works for most people. Move from automatic to intentional. Don't let alcohol be background noise. If you're drinking most nights out of habit, pause and ask, is this for relaxation, social bonding, or distraction? That moment of reflection is where real behavior change starts. Limit alcohol to 1 or 2 nights a week, ideally social occasions, not stress relief. Make it a conscious event, not a coping mechanism. If you do drink, buffer your brain, eat a real meal beforehand, hydrate before and after, and stop drinking at least 3 hours before bed to minimize sleep disruption. Find ritual replacements. Herbal teas, sparkling water with lime, or adaptogenic drinks can scratch the same itch without the neurological cost. You're not giving something up, you're trading up. And if you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who values clarity, self-awareness, and actionable insight. So if this speech is resonating with you, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. This community is growing around science-backed tools to help you feel, think, and perform better every day for the long haul. Because here's what it really comes down to. Alcohol isn't a toxin because it makes you feel drunk. It's a toxin because it subtly erodes your mental sharpness, your emotional resilience, and your physical recovery, especially when it becomes routine. And once you understand the cost, you can choose with your eyes wide open. Let sets be real about what this means. Let sets take a breath and zoom out. We've walked through 7 categories of foods that are quietly undermining your health, from ultra-processed oils and excess sugar to artificial additives, charred meats, refined grains, trans fats, and even alcohol. Not because you're weak, not because you're reckless, but because our modern food environment is designed to make you forget what real nourishment even feels like. This isn't about panic or guilt. It's about clarity, and clarity creates power. The truth is, most people aren't dying from freak accidents or rare genetic disorders. They're dying from the slow drip of chronic inflammation, metabolic dysfunction, and silent damage, often rooted in what's on their plate day in and day out. But here's the good news that also means most of it is preventable. The human body is incredibly adaptive. Your liver, brain, heart, microbiome, they're always listening, always trying to heal. And the moment you stop feeding your body the things that break it down and start feeding it the things that build it up, something shifts, not just physically, but mentally. Your energy returns, your mood steadies, your sleep deepens, your cravings weaken, and you start feeling like yourself again, not the overstimulated, undernourished version you've grown used to. But none of this happens by accident. You have to choose it. So here sits what I suggest. Pick one category from this video, just one, and remove it for a week. It could be seed oils or added sugar or alcohol. Notice what changes. Energy, sleep, focus, gut health. Don't just read studies. Run the experiment in your own body. Then reintroduce it slowly, intentionally. See how you feel. Let your biology, not your habits, decide what earns a place in your life. This is how real change happens, not from shame or discipline alone, but from awareness and experimentation. You become the researcher. You gather the data and you make decisions based on you, not marketing or trends or outdated advice. If this video gave you even one useful insight, I'd love for you to hit like and subscribe. Not for vanity metrics, but because that small action tells the algorithm this content is worth showing to more people. And I think it is. I think the tools for better health should be calm, clear, science-based, and free. We're not here to chase perfection. We're here to build awareness, to reclaim our biology, and to eat like our life depends on it, because it actually does.